welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be doing another tier list, but this time of another 100 manhwa that I have read. This is basically part 2 of my 100 manhwa tier list. That being said, guys, keep in mind that this is my opinion, my experiences with these manhwa. If you love them to death and would rank them higher than me, hell, leave a comment down below on why you think it's better than what I said. And inversely, if I gave it a good ranking and you think it's complete trash, feel free to sound off in the comments. You definitely did on the last video, and I think it's nice to see the engagement in general. Let's jump right into the video. Here we go, guys. So I've left in the description down below a list of these 100 manhwa and the timestamps for each of them, so that you guys can quickly navigate if you're curious on my thoughts on a specific manhwa, and you can track back afterwards. I know it was an ask from last time. Sorry for not putting that in, but let's get right into it. Starting off with Second Life Ranker. Okay, this one is S tier for a lot of people. I have always been a little iffy on Second Life Ranker. Follows the main character whose brother basically was betrayed and passes away. And he goes on this quest to climb a tower to avenge his brother. It's a simple concept, but it does a lot of stuff with itemization. It follows a really interesting dynamic of characters, but the art style has always felt a little bit like, feels like how 3D animation is when you watch an anime that you really like and all of a sudden they switch to 3D animation and you're like, what? Why did you do that? That's kind of the art style in this in some cases. Again, tell me if I'm the only one that feels this way. That being said, I still think it's a phenomenal story with great storytelling. It has some pacing, some arcs that aren't as enjoyable as others. I think it definitely deserves to be top A tier. I think this one has the potential to be an S tier series if they can stick the landing with the ending. It's a very intricate storyline, and it's nowhere near the end. But the scaling of power in this series is pretty crazy. All right, the Heavenly Demon That Can't Live a Normal Life. It's a fun manhwa. I don't think it's doing things that are particularly original. Its art style is pretty good. It's enjoyable. I'm going to drop it down in the C tier. What it does, it's really good at. The fights are pretty on point. That whole idea of a character that's like, you know what, this time it's going to be chill, but he always keeps getting dragged into situations is fun, and I can't say I don't enjoy it. Castle is a manhwa that is of the gangster genre, and I have to say that I'm slowly starting to really enjoy how South Korea does its gangster stuff. I think it's really well done. Castle's a lot of fun. Follows a character returning to South Korea, if I remember correctly, trying to break the stranglehold that Castle, this syndicate of crime, has on the city, and tries to basically topple them and fight against them and what he's doing. It's really enjoyable. You see a little bit of the dark side of that South Korean gangster mindset, and it's cool, man. It's really cool. I think it is well done. I think in the gangster genre, it's really good. I'm gonna give it a B. I think it's really good. I don't think it's it has some slower stuff in it. I think it doesn't quite deliver on the promise all the time, but I think that in the gangster genre, it's one of the better ones. I'm Not the Demon God's Lackey is a very different kind of manhwa, and I dig it like hell. Like the idea of a bookstore owner, but normally when you have these stories, you have a character that's just quickly jumps into like the typical tropes where he becomes this OP protagonist and blah, blah, blah. And he has some of that going on, but a lot of this is about storytelling and really interesting interactions with different customers that come into his shop. But what I will say is that it doesn't deliver on its promise. What I saw in the first couple of chapters of I'm Not the Demon God's Lackey was something that was going to feel really different from other manhwa. And it does turn out to feel a little bit more samey later on. That being said, I respect the hell that its approach is different, and it's still significantly interesting enough that I would go put it in the C tier. That being said, if I were going to rank it out of 5, I think that it's pretty fair where it's at online, which is something like a 3.8 or 3.4. It's not a perfect series. The main character is a mix of insecure and confident, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's worth checking out. Next is a Viral Hit. Viral Hit is a fun one. Concept is really cool. If you're a fan of social media and like the idea of a character basically staging fights for the purpose of getting views on social media, and it works like crazy, and it becomes this escalating situation where he's fighting these crazier and crazier situations. Do I think the overarching story of this one is perfection when it comes to like fight manhwa? There's some really good fight manhwa, even in the list that I'm giving you today. But what it does and the uniqueness of its scenario, which is not entirely unique, makes it really good to me. And I really enjoy the setup of these fights, and also some really annoying dynamics or painful dynamics that get created because of it. I'm going to go put this in the B tier with Castle. I think Viral Hit is solid. It has some other names, but yeah. Speaking of badasses in school, Boss in School. Okay. I'm going to get a whole lot of hate for this. Boss in School is loved like crazy, but for some reason the art style does not work for me. There's also another work on this list from the same artist that I think has some of the same issues. Is like the story is super freaking basic, but the fights are phenomenal. Really, really good. So story being weak, the art style really not being my jam, though I do know people that really like the art style, surprisingly, which I think is nothing wrong with it. I'm going to shove it in C. It's going to feel like a lot of stuff's in C, but I assure you we're going to be filling up some other sections very, very soon. Looking at what's coming next, we have Memoir of a God of War. Memoir of the God of War is an interesting one. I think it's a story with a really interesting art style. This picture doesn't quite give it justice, but I think the art style is really well done in it. The following strong character kind of dynamic is also pretty commonly done. I don't think it's a perfect series. I think there's some better stuff on this list. Though I will say, like, it's worth reading 100%. I'm going to put this in the C class again. I don't think it deserves to be D or E. It's too good for that. However, yeah. I'm going to put it in C. There's going to be a lot of C's. C is basically the perfectly average series. It's good, it's delivering on what it needs to do, but it has some type of critical flaw that's not quite delivering. Eternal Club is something that's kind of the same. It's kind of in regards to delivering. What its idea is, Eternal Club, this idea of someone that could take the lifespan of someone and give it to someone else, so it's also called Lifespan Club, is super interesting. And they go places with it that is really interesting. That being said, there is a certain a loop you get into in the story where you can kind of see it. It happens in Dr. Stone a lot when you watch it, of okay, we have problem. We are going to find out these are the steps to solving the problem. Solution. Same thing happens again. Eternal Club's kind of the same. Find a person willing to sell their lifespan. Find a person that's looking to buy the lifespan. Create a scenario where this is going to happen, or some kind of permutation of that. But I will think the idea is interesting enough that it is a B tier, absolutely. If you put it in A tier, I respect it 100%. I don't know if I would necessarily put it there, but for now, it's a B tier for me. I actually read it quite recently, so it's quite fresh for me, but it's worth checking out. Fist Demon of Manhwa is not the best manhwa at all. I did not enjoy this manhwa very much. I don't think it's dog crap. There's definitely things that are worse than that out there. I'm going to put it in D tier. I can't even quite say why it is, if it's the main protagonist or something, but there's just something about this series that I can't quite enjoy. Whether it's something about the art style, which I still think is pretty good, there's just something about it that doesn't quite land for me. But again, it's a personal taste thing. All right. This is one that I've had as a comment so many times. Lookism. I have tried so many times to read Lookism because the first few chapters just turned me off of the series completely. For the purpose of this list, I went and I read through Lookism. And I have to say, you were largely right. I think it's a really good series. The art style is fantastic. The fights are really good. The dynamic in the school, the amount of effort put into that they put into just developing each side story and each character's like motivations and interests and stuff like that is really good. And the story has this feeling of reality that's very different out there. But there's something about Lookism that for me doesn't quite land. And that is, particularly when you get into it for a bit. At the beginning you don't feel it, but when you've read a fair bit of chapters, you start really feeling that there's no overarching narrative. There's no feeling of like, oh, we're going to go from point A to point B. It's rather, it feels like a combination of a lot of side stories together. Like, tell me how you feel about Lookism. I know Lookism is one of those things that has a huge fan base, and those that love it to death, and those that really don't. Tell me if you feel that a little bit, that like there's that lacking overarching connection to it. There's no way that takes it out of being from A tier. I think at what it does, it's one of the best. I think the first few chapters are a big turnoff. I think there's some comedy that does not land for me in this series. But I think when it comes to school series, it's hard to beat. The only thing I find is still better is Windbreaker in its school stuff is still better. But yeah. Okay, Martial Artist League Gwak. We've got a lot of stuff with some really unique art styles over here. League Gwak is good, man. It's really, really good. But it ended all of a sudden. League Gwak came to an end like really recently within the last month. I actually hadn't read it till it came to an end. Someone referenced it to me on Discord, and it was such a good read. And when I got to that ending, I was just like, what's this all of a sudden? It was infuriating. I understand the artist kind of wanted to move on, I guess. That's kind of the motivation for it. But it was frustrating because I think Martial Artist League Gwak, if you can deal with the art style, which is not for everyone, is a solid A-tier manhwa. Really good at what it does, but it looks a little weird. It's probably not for everyone. But yeah, check it out. Okay, Storm In is something I think a lot of people are sleeping on. It follows a character that is I'll just say an OP badass because that's just a typical concept for these series. But he's so strong. He's so strong. And he's put in this scenario where his general tells him to retire. Tells him, step away from the battlefield, live another life, live a simpler life. And he does it. He does it. The end, that's it. No, obviously that's not exactly what happened, but he does. He buys he joins an inn and becomes an innkeeper, which I feel like is not the 100% original thing, with the goal of living a normal life, which obviously, if you're a demon of the battlefield, it is a badass. Like, problems just seem to follow you around, and they definitely do for him. And this series has an art style that looks like it's painted. It's beautiful, and this manhwa is slept on way too much. It may not be a B tier for everyone, but I think it's worth putting in the B tier. I think it's really good at what it does. I don't think that it is a hyper complex story, but I feel like there's these moments that gave me like these badass chills during a story, which is not something I get all the time, but I definitely like the way they did it in this one. All right, Unordinary. Unordinary is good. The art style doesn't work for me too much. It feels it's a webtoon, but it feels very webtoony. It's not as nice as some of the other things on this list, but from a storyline perspective, from a development perspective, this one's been a long-running series. Unordinary is really good. I'm going to put it at B tier with the other ones. I'm curious what you think about Unordinary, actually. Give me your thoughts down below on Unordinary. I feel like this is one of the ones that has its fan base that really like it. Often it's people that have read it for a longer period of time that haven't just gotten into it. I blitzed through it quite recently, and I feel like if I had started it long ago, before I read so much stuff, I would have found it much more engaging. Similarly to another one on this list, actually. it's kind of diminished a little bit by other stuff coming out that does some of its aspects a little bit better. But it's a fun manhwa, and it's worth checking out. Okay. The Promised Orchid. The Promised Orchid. Okay. So The Promised Orchid is from the same creator as The Breaker. That's why actually some of the characters look rather similar. It has phenomenal fights. An art style that is probably in the top 5-ish of manhwa, in my opinion. It just looks fantastic, dreamy, and beautiful. I'm a little unsure because I think it's a story that follows a character that can see yokai, can see demons, and his interaction with them. The monster design is fantastic. The fights are great, and the characters are they feel real. But I don't feel like the story hits the same highs as some of the ones in my S tier from my other tier list. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think of anything on this list, it is the closest to an S tier series. I think it's worth checking out. Absolutely. If you haven't, and it's finished. That should be a hint enough. But Promised Orchid, check it out. If you are a lover or a hater of this series, I'd love to see why down below. Warrior Wudang, or A Path of the Shaman, has a kind of a funny setup at the beginning. Path of the Shaman follows a main character that old man about to perish faces this situation where he's going to get reincarnated, and as like a twist of fate, the gods reincarnate him into the body of a shaman, which is basically the enemy he had been fighting against, or one of the many enemies he had dominated on the battlefield in his previous life. So he's a natural hate towards shamans in general because he thinks it's a stupid thing. And it's his OP adventure going through that. It's a fun series. I don't think it's particularly special in any way, but I don't think it is anything lower than a C. I think I'll leave it in the C. Like, we're gonna have like a ton of C's in this, and it may be even low for some of these series, but I think it's justified in this case. Sword King in a Fantasy World. All right, Sword King in a Fantasy World. Real simple story. Great art. I'm gonna put it in the C tier as well. I'm looking for, in the B tier, like, you're gonna notice, like, in the case of Unordinary is one of the originators, it's series that are doing something a little bit different, and A tier is stories that are doing things significantly better than everything else. But I don't think it's doing things that are particularly exceptional. All right, Apotheosis. All right, it's time for some hate, guys. You might very much dislike me for the next two. Martial Peak and Apotheosis. They both have some of the same problems and some of the greatest moments. The early chapters of Apotheosis, of a character chasing after his sister to get her back, is great. His rise from being shunned and basically sentenced to death to becoming this amazing battler that gained these special abilities is phenomenal. The level of power sets and itemization is truly interesting. But the same thing that Martial Peak struggles from is an infinite world. It doesn't know when to stop. So every time, these things have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of chapters. In the case of Martial Peak, I know we passed 3,000 something a little while back. I stopped at 3,000. Apotheosis has less, however, it's also significantly higher than anything else you've read. These are manhwa that have a problem with power scaling, basically, and they always go up to another realm. So if they are the strongest in this realm, they'll basically elevate themselves to the next realm, and then they become the strongest of this realm. It's not that dissimilar from Dragon Ball in some ways. However, in this case, they are doing so in a storyline dynamic. But the problem is, it's too much. It's one of those stories where you're like, all right, so does the story end when he gets his sister back, basically? And the sister becomes very much a secondary part of the story. The story becomes more about let's interact with what's going on in the world. Because of that, Apotheosis, I'm going to put Apotheosis at D. I'm going to put Martial Peak at C. I actually think for a good portion of the story, Apotheosis is better. However, there was a point where I stopped caring, which is terrible because I actually like the protagonist of Apotheosis better than Marshall Peak. The reason I think Marshall Peak deserves to be here, and this I'm going to get so much hate for because I read 3,000 chapters of the thing, so clearly I really liked it. In Marshall Peak, nothing matters. The power scaling is so much that nothing really matters. There are so many introductions of random characters that just disappear from the story. The girls in the stories serve the purpose of harems. They have one archetype, and then they go off, with the exception of one that I actually liked. The rest of the side characters don't matter. It's only about the protagonist and who will get him to his different objective. There are arcs in these stories that, if I were to evaluate them to themselves, would be A-tier arcs. In Marshall Peak, the arc earlier on when he's in the competition against his brothers, his different family members, to become the lead of the house. Amazing arc. Some of the early arcs of Apotheosis, fantastic. But overall, it's just writing to write, and it's very frustrating after a while. But again, my opinion, like, disagree or agree. Keep in mind, I have read at least 700 to 800 chapters of Apotheosis, and I've read 3,000 chapters of Marshall Peak. So I've read them. I've enjoyed them enough to keep reading them, but I still don't think that they're a phenomenal series. Advanced Players in a Tutorial Tower it's good. The premise is good. I actually don't like it much. I'm putting it a D. The reason I'm putting it a D is just the super OP protagonist that gets stuck in a scenario that made him stronger than everyone else, and then goes around like flexing in weird ways. It was really cool for the first few chapters, but my god, was it not interesting after a while, because his level of strength compared to everyone else is just not fun. It's just not funny. There's still some interesting fights here and there, but like overall, I don't think it's that great. I don't think the art style is phenomenal. I think it's got some general issues. Sword Sheath's Child is a beautiful manhwa. Artistically, it looks fantastic. Storyline wise, I think it's super good. I'm going to put it up at B. Why is it not A? I think it's an enjoyment factor. I didn't enjoy the experience that much. However, I have to say that it does stuff that's unique. Its art style is really deliverable. And I think that overall, it doesn't have any key huge problems. Rooftop Swordsman. All right, here we go. I think Rooftop Swordsman's generally pretty bad. People really like this series, but honestly, from a storytelling perspective, it's got nothing going for it. It's a story of revenge, of a character getting back at bullies that are like bullies to a point of ridiculousness. He gets a sword that falls from the sky, gives him he starts training, becomes this OP badass. The story becomes insane later. It's a mess. If you want pure fights and you want an interesting art style, because it's the same one as Boston School, if I remember correctly, I think it's the same one as Boston School. Its fights are good. Like, honestly, I think he does fights very well. But I think he should partner with someone for storylines. Because I feel like from a storytelling perspective, it's not there. It's not there at all. It stops also on a semi-cliffhanger, what's next kind of moment on a warship with a giant sword. Anyway, it's a crazy series. I still think it's worth checking out. I don't think nothing here is complete trash. But still. Black Haze is a good series with an art style that calls back to a different time. It calls back to a period when Manhwa was kind of just starting out, when you had things like Magician and things like that. It's an art style that's a bit more simplistic, but still beautiful in its own way. It might not be for everyone, because it's not that game-like art style you'll find in like Second Life Ranker or Advanced Tutorial Player, things like that. It's an art style that's very much more of the defined eyes. Eyes are a big focal point of it, and you feel it's one of those in-school manhwas. It's got a lot of storytelling taking place. It's got hundreds of chapters too. If you're looking, it's 200 plus chapters. I don't remember exactly how many, but it's definitely a longer read. It's a good one. It's definitely, I'm going to put it at C. I think it's a good manhwa overall. I don't think it wins at all at storytelling. It's got some weaker point, but it's still pretty good. All right, Terror Man, Revival Man. Terror Man. Terror Man's a fun ride. Okay, so Terror Man's art style is spectacular. I'm just trying to remind myself of the art style of Terror Man. It's really cool in general. And it's worth checking out. Like, its ratings are not that great online. I think it's better than people give it credit for, to be perfectly honest. I'm going to put you in the C tier. Revival Man, I think it's a little bit less good, but I'm still going to put it in C tier. Both Terror Man and Revival Man are part of things that you'll find on Webtoon. They're a bunch of series that were extremely popular for a period, generally rated around the mid-range of manhwa, but they're a fun action series with interesting dynamics and really cool art styles, particularly in the Terror Man case. Study Group. Study Group has one of the most fun setups in manhwa. In fighting school manhwa. Just the whole idea that the obsession of the main character was like Bruce Lee instead of being some typical geek is kind of funny. Particularly like his desire to protect this teacher girl that was his tutor before. It creates a cool dynamic. I like the way the storytelling takes place in this. I think I'd rank it about the same as Viral Hit. They're both exciting. They're both enjoyable. I think they're pretty good overall. The Game I Came From. Okay, so I love The Game I Came From. I don't know why. Because I'm going to put it pretty low on this list, to be honest with you. Keeping in mind, this is one of the series where I jump at each chapter I get. But objectively, or a little bit objectively, I have to say the art style is not great. It's very crooked in a lot of cases. Like, things are just not lined up. Eyes just are not where they should be in some cases. The writing is super young, like very, very basic. But the game system and world building is good. I actually think that they did a great job building the video game systems, the types of quests they have to do, what type of things he knows that makes him better at the game and stuff like that. Because of that, I'll keep it out of the D tier because I think it does really succeed, but I don't think it deserves to be anywhere above the C tier. I don't think even it has the potential to ever be above that. I don't have an issue with an art style not being perfect. I have an issue with art style not being consistent. And unfortunately, there's a lot of cases in this one where the art style is just not well drawn. Like taking this from someone that can't draw for shit, like perfectly on. So I do have a bit of an unfortunate relationship with that one. FFS class Trash Hero. Trash Hero is a lot of fun. All right, FFF class Trash Hero. It's good. It's an enjoyable series. Great premise, though, by the way. Just a main character that's like kind of an ass, and he gets what's coming to him to a certain extent. Kind of like the Transport to Another World story. He goes through this adventure, and basically he's evaluated at the end of it being like, hey, you did all these things, but you did them because you're a jackass, not because you were particularly a good person. And he gets kind of punished for it. He gets these reincarnations that are kind of worse and worse to a certain extent until the story kind of gets going in a normal kind of fashion. The first couple of chapters are super set-up-y in the what life's he actually going to end up living. The life he does end up living, though, has some really funny interactions. The characters, the series is somewhat fairly comedic, but I actually don't think that it succeeds at everything it's trying to do. I think its premise is better than the series itself. I'll land it at C. I'm going to put it at D. The comedy didn't land for me, and when you're a comedy series and it doesn't land, I don't think that makes you very great. It's an opinion thing. It didn't land for me. That being said, it could still work for you. So check it out. I know a lot of people actually that really like this series. Don't take it in any wrong way. All right. Okay, this one's pretty interesting because at first I wasn't crazy about it, but I actually ended up liking it quite a bit. When a character is it's Escort Warrior. What's the name of this thing again? I always forget. Hardcore Leveling Warrior. My bad. Hardcore Leveling Warrior starts a story of a character that is basically the OP dude of his world. He's in this game system. He's so strong, stronger than everyone. But he's got these deals where he's taking loans and doing things. But it's fine because he's this badass and he'll pay it back. But no one likes him because he's kind of a jackass in his world. And this is kind of a redemption story, sort of. He's still kind of a jackass, but like it's an interesting story where you follow like a redemption story of him. It's also finished, so if you want to jump into it, art style really unique. You can see it from the thumbnail here, but it's a good one. Check it out. C tier. I don't think it deserves to be above that because the storytelling is not that deep. But yeah, Worn and Torn Newbie, putting it up at B. Worn and Torn Newbie has a good action game system type world going on. It's enjoyable. It works most of the time, and I think it's worth checking out. It's weird that I'm saying so little about War and Torn Newbie, but like I had dropped it for a while, jumped back into it, and if Manhwa manages to keep me engaged and interested most of the way, it's pretty good. Its art style is a little uneven, I will say. They could drop it. I'd say it's on the lower B tier compared to the other ones that I think are significantly better. All right, Soul Land. Okay. I'm evaluating Soul Land as a whole. If you haven't read Soul Land, there's Soul Land 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's 5. I've read 4 of them. I haven't read the 5th. I've read them up till now. And they're largely still ongoing. So it means they're not even done. It's another series that suffers from the too big for its own good story, kind of like Martial Peak. It's a common thing in Chinese manhwa of just keeping things going for good, and I think that unfortunately because of that there's some big misses. But what I will say is the characters of Soul Land are much better than the characters of Martial Peak and Apotheosis. Apotheosis' protagonist is still really good, but the side characters are so unimportant. Whereas I feel like the ones in Soul Land remind me a little bit of Tales of Demons and Gods, where the side characters are still pretty important and pretty well, they're at least a little fleshed out to be a little bit more interesting. I'm going to shove it in the C tier. Definitely a good one. All right, Solo Spellcaster. I'm not crazy about Solo Spellcaster. I know some people that like it. I'm going to put it in the D tier. On this principle, I'm going to put this one down here, actually. Yeah. I'm going to put Solo Spellcaster here just to flex things out. So far, of all the series I've seen here, the one I dislike the most is absolutely this one. I think that Rooftop Swordmaster is the weakest overall manhwa of this entire list, and I don't think it's... I think unless you're really in it for action, I think you can avoid it, to be honest with you. Though, again, some people love it, so more power to you. Duoluo, I'm also going to put this in the E tier. Duoluo is such a shame, because when you start it, you're like, hey, this is some... There's also multiple of this series as well, similar to Soul Land, but I think Soul Land is just a way better story. The concept of the start of the story of Duoluo, you're like, this has a lot of potential. When I say this thing does not deliver on what it is and turns into a childish just back and forth with the other characters of like, oh, I can do this, yes, because you underestimated me before, but I'm this OP badass now. But the writing is terrible, guys. And it's not just a translation question, unfortunately, because like I have people around me that speak the language, and I can say that it's just not great writing as a whole. The concept and the setups are not that great. That being said, I do think the Duoluo 2, the first arc, is good and worth checking out. But beyond that, not so much. This one is Soul Station Necromancer, which is cut off the wrong part. I'd say Soul Station Necromancer is among the better Necromancer stories. Necromancy has been super popular for some time, but I think it's a B tier story. Setup is cool. the rebuilding of his skill sets. It's a video game system thing. I don't think it's entirely innovative in any way, though I think among the stories that do this, it's among the better ones. It's definitely an interesting one. So if you're in the vibe for the purpley arise vibes of soul leveling without much of the coolness that soul leveling had, check out Soul Station Necromancer. Taming Master. Taming Master's a C for me. I wasn't that on board for Taming Master. Good overall story, good overall power sets and concepts of the world. The whole taming concept of the world is actually really interesting. The storytelling is okay. The characters are okay. And as an overall series, I still think it's pretty good. However, I don't think it's excelling in any particular area. Okay, The Live is what I would consider a series with an amazing setup concept. I absolutely enjoy it, and I think visually it looks fantastic. I think that there's some unevenness, however, with the look sometimes. Listen to this concept. You're in the depths of depression. Your life is kind of pointless. You've lost your wife and your child, and there's no real enjoyment or hope to your world. However, you get a diary from the future that tells you of a way that you could see your family again. You play a game in order to earn certain things that will allow you to get to that point and enjoy your future again. You get the hope to succeed again, and obviously you want to play this game. You have this diary that gives you an advantage that others don't have at the same time. It's a cool concept. Some of those things you'll hear, you're like, oh, I've seen that in, I don't know, Future Diary, or I've seen that in this story and this story. But I felt like the execution of this one was actually pretty darn good. I really enjoyed The Live. I'm still reading it now. I think there's some stuff later on that I'm not crazy about. I actually think I'm going to put it at B. I don't think it deserves to be A. You'll understand when you read it why there's some things that don't quite work for it. But, yeah. Okay, The Challenger. I think that's The Challenger. The Challenger, for me, you're going to maybe be surprised. This is a D tier series. The only reason it's not E tier, to be perfectly honest with you, and I think I'm hesitant to do it, is I have never read as predictable writing as I have in this manhwa. The main protagonist, his motivations, the storytelling, the game-like world. If it wasn't for the visuals, I would probably put it in the E tier. Unfortunately, it's a really pretty series. I'm still going to leave it in D. If you love it, there's nothing wrong with it. But it does not work for me. I think it's very predictable and surprisingly childish. Dice. Dice is B tier. The concept of being down on your luck in school and having a chance to maybe change your situation with some dice that give you different circumstances to happen is pretty cool. And I think the story building they've done with it is on point. Art style is iffy for me, and overall enjoyment was very mixed in this story. I dropped it for periods. I was never that excited for the chapters. I have to put it a B tier, even though I can't particularly pinpoint something that was very wrong about it. All right, auto hunting is a pretty somewhat interesting concept of a character that gets basically a button to auto hunt monsters, MMORPG style, and kind of gets a freebie at success. But the art style is very mid. The storytelling is kind of average. I overall don't think it's that great as a series. The World After the Fall. Oh, how many things I've gone through with this. Okay. So, a few weeks ago, I would have put The World After the Fall in the D tier. Because I was finding, from a storyline perspective, that's something that I should love. Because I think it has some of the best visuals of the past couple of years. Has been under-delivering story-wise. The first tower, the first couple of chapters, I was like, this thing is the next shit. And then we got the storyline in the city that was completely uninteresting. No fun whatsoever. Yes, cool, he makes big splash. The whole stab thing, I'm over it. not interesting. The fighting style he has is not an interesting one. However, the past few chapters, what happened at the tournament, the larger world that they're building, these other monsters and demons, the side characters they're introducing, I'm back on board. I do not think that this manhwa has any hope of ever making it to S tier or even making it to A tier. I'm going to drop it in the B tier. You might disagree, and I put Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint in the S tier because storytelling with visuals, good characters, and everything is great. As a character, he's so boring. He does nothing interesting. He doesn't interact that much. It's all about the characters around him interacting towards him, but he doesn't even react that much. So he doesn't give us much to work with in this case. It's just a bunch of people impressed by him all the time. But I'm hopeful because I think where we're at in the story and what we're about to start in this quest is engaging and interesting enough, and the side characters are interesting enough to carry the story. I might be wrong, but we'll see. The Greatest Estate Developer, I like manhwa that do things a little bit differently. The estate developer idea of having this power to basically prospect and build an estate and build things for personal profit is an amazing skill, which is quite useful. And I'm enjoying it. I can't deny it. Is it a perfect series? No. I think it deserves to be at the C tier. Nothing above it. So far, it hasn't done anything that's blown me out of the water, but it still has some time left before it reaches its end. Overpowered Sword. Okay, Overpowered Sword sounds like the most generic thing in the world. Sword falls from the sky. Sword talks to you. You become very strong because it teaches you how to become very strong. You're already this hardworking boy. You deserve it. But what I found interesting about Overpowered Sword is there's actually a more interesting storyline taking place around things that has me a bit more engaged than I thought I would be. I don't think still it's very original or it's doing anything particularly special. I do think it deserves to be in the C tier as well. I'll be taking a break for personal reasons is another one I think is doing too much. Okay, so this is a manhwa I enjoy, but right away from the beginning, I can tell you that this manhwa is probably never going to go anywhere that I'm very interested with because it's going to have to choose its lane. It's fun. This concept of trade and barter that he has this power that gives him I think it's the God's Eye or something related to a shop. He has a shop that he can use to get items in another world, but it's the best shop you can possibly get. And he's also a light novelist, but he's also fighting monsters with this amazing power that he got. But he's also training another person, kinda. There's too much going on in the series, and I think it needs to choose a lane. But unfortunately, I don't think it's very good at storytelling right now. I'm gonna put it in D tier. For a series to kind of lose me so early on to being oh, I'm not really interested in where this is going, it's not great. To hell with being a saint, I'll be a doctor. I really enjoy the series. The art style is pretty good. It's pretty clean. A lot of the Doctor series have a very similar storyline style, whereas this one actually has nicer visuals related to it. I really enjoy it. I don't think it's a perfect series by any means. I'm going to put it in the C tier, and we'll leave it there. The Hero Returns, now that I think of it, I think I put it on my other tier list. I put it near the bottom, so I'm going to put it here. The reason I put it on that low was because, to be honest, the main character is just not who you want it to be. The concept that they set up at the beginning is not the concept it follows. No, I'm going to put it back up to D tier. Because some people left some comments last time that I think are legit. It is a good series nonetheless. It does deliver. It's just that its first chapters were so hype into something completely different that I was super engaged. However, it didn't quite turn out to be what I was hoping. Worthless Regression. Another regression manhwa. There's a bunch of other ones out there. It doesn't turn out to be that worthless of a regression because of the things he knows. However, I honestly think this one is the most generic regression story out there. For me, it is a D tier story. I actually was like, I was reading it and I was just like, oh God, I have read too many of these stories. They're all the same at this point. All right, Helmut. I think Helmut's pretty good. I don't think its art style is anything to write home about. I think it's quite uninteresting, actually, which is a shame because like the art style of the thumbnail is phenomenal. Storytelling's pretty good. Storyline is all right. The fights are pretty good. Following younger characters around, it is what it is. I do get tired of watching super young characters, but I think it deserves to be. It still has a long way to go. We'll see where it goes, but for now, I'm going to put it in the C tier. It does have the unfortunate potential of dropping to D tier depending what happens, but for now, I'll put it there. Book of Lagier, I'm actually going to put that down here. I can't even tell you entirely why. Book of Lagier just doesn't deliver. This concept of taking over the body, becoming this demon lord, is he a demon lord or something like that, where he's going through doing these evil acts, or not even these evil acts really, to be honest. I don't know. I don't find the main character interesting at all. The body he inhabited was like even less interesting than himself. And yeah, no, just not interested in where it went. Okay, Noblesse. Noblesse is an A tier. Definitely not an S tier. Oh my god, no. Way too focused on the school part of the story. But everything related to the vampires, related to the bloodlines is fantastic. It works for me 100%. Lord of Ruins is D tier. Pure MMO, like not even MMO, video gamey type fighting. Thought it would be interesting because of the sniper angle of the story, because I actually kind of like that it's a sniper is not something you see super commonly. But overall, I just don't think it's that great. Speaking of which, I'm actually going to do the sniper one. This one's significantly better in my opinion. Arcana Fantasy, I actually think is probably C tier. It's another one with, it has another name related to guns. I forget the name exactly, but it's a lot better than I thought it would be. And I think it's worth checking out if you want to watch something else with like a sniper style combat. It's good. Above the Heavens is a C tier. In the Manhwa areas, I actually think it's one of the better ones out there. I've got 2 romance ones in a row for you. Actually, I have some more romance on this list, which is something I didn't have on the other list at all, but I have a couple here. My Wife is the Demon Queen. I'll be honest with you, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I really enjoy My Wife is the Demon Queen. The first couple of chapters kind of hyped me up. Like the first chapter 0, hyped me up for it a little bit more than I should have been. And the concept of a character that's isekai'd into another world, becomes the husband of the Demon Queen for a kind of a silly reason, but how they actually develop a companionship and develop like a relationship is really cool. It definitely isn't a pure romance story by any means. It's more of a typical isekai than anything else, with a really interesting female lead. Still follows the main boy character most of the time, though I will say she's kind of more interesting than he is. He's a bit more of the white bread style of protagonist. My Wife is the Empress. It's silly. Okay, I enjoy this one. The main character is the strongest combatant in history for the rebellion, and she's actually the Empress. Neither of them knows what the other is initially in the story. Actually, for a good long time in the story, actually. And they're technically not on the same side in a lot of situations politically, which makes that some awkward situations happen. And they're married from the beginning. They're married. They care about each other and all these things. But the whole thing of they don't know each other's identity lasts way too long in this series. I'm gonna put it at D tier, despite having enjoyed it for a long time. They just pushed it too far. All right, Supernova. I mistakenly thought this series was over, but it is not over. It's just on hiatus and has been on for a while. I'm going to put Supernova at C. It's another school combat manhwa that turns into something a bit more. Gets trained by a cat that I think is the reincarnation of a warlord from years ago. The whole concept is cool. The fights are really, really enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. You should probably check it out. I Grow Stronger by Eating doesn't really work for me. I'm going to put it a D. Yeah. I'm going to put it a D. I don't think it's that great. Let's say it's top D, low C. It could go into C, honestly. But I think it's just I wasn't engaged by a storyline, which is a shame because I actually liked that it was doing something a little bit different by the whole eating concept of getting stronger. But I don't know. I don't think it delivered on the concept very much. Unholy Blood. Vampire story. There aren't enough of these in... I don't honestly, there's Noblesse up here. I think we could definitely have more of them. I think the storytelling is kind of atrocious in moments in this one. However, if I remember correctly, it's finished. And it's pretty good, honestly. Overall. Like, I think the storyline is... Overarching story is kind of weak. The characterization of vampires, like kind of like the mutants are in X-Men as being these rejected members of society and that are looked down upon, but the main character actually being this badass vampire that was born as a vampire, unlike many others that are turned later. It's cool. It's all right. I think it's deep. God of Blackfield. All right. I'm gonna put God of Blackfield. I'm gonna put God of Blackfield up at A. Okay, God of Blackfield I had dropped. True story. I had dropped God of Blackfield after the first arc because someone told me who the villain was of the second arc. And I was just like, I don't want to see that. That is not interesting to me. So I'm going to drop this now. Really enjoyed the first arc. It ended. I'm done. Great. But some people kept telling me, like, God of Blackfield is so good, guys. You got to jump back into it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump back in. Okay, it's still awesome after that as well, and I really should have stuck to it longer. Kind of frustrated. But yeah, I think it's A tier. God of Blackfield has some of the best fights in the action school genre. It makes more sense. Well, it makes more sense. The character's a reincarnation after being betrayed, and he inhabits the body of basically a teenager in South Korea. Who was getting bullied. Yeah, I don't know about realistic, but I feel like the storyline arc makes a bit more sense than it does in Mercenary Enrollment. Where Mercenary Enrollment, it just feels like... Now it starts making a bit more sense because it's just the old camp he's from. But it's basically just, how can we create a situation where the sister gets kidnapped again? How can we make another character get kidnapped? So the main character has to be... There's a lot of that in these series, and I just feel that God of Blackfield kind of makes sense when it comes to what's going on in it. Max Level Returner. Ooh, Max Level Returner is okay. We're not talking about the Max Level Hero has returned. We're talking about Max Level Returner, which is a bit different. There's too many of these series. God damn it. I'm going to put Max Level Returner at C. It's fine. It's okay. It's not doing anything particularly special, and that's the reason for it. Trace might be one of the ones you haven't heard of. Trace follows another one of those stories where there's these things called, I think it's troubles that appear in the world, and there's these people with superpowers that develop it. Not another thing. Ooh, I think I forgot to put Superhuman Era in here. Just a note. Superhuman Era, I'm going to say, is a... B tier, actually. I didn't put it on this list, but I think it's a B tier. I'm going to put Trace down at... I'm going to put it in D. I actually don't think Trace does anything particularly special or anything that great. I think its art style wasn't really for me, though I will say it's unique and it might be for you, but it's not working for me. Moonlight Sculptor. Oh my god. How is this manhwa so good? I don't even understand. The Moonlight Sculptor story of, like... a character gaining these quests to become a sculptor in a game-like scenario, and where it actually ends up going is so good. It's ridiculous. If you haven't read it, I don't want to talk more about it just because I think it'll spoil it a little bit, but it's really good, guys. Like, wow. Like, check it out. The Last Human. The Last Human. The Last Human was one of my earlier manhwa that I read, actually. It's a zombie manhwa that follows a character that basically there's zombies, but there's also powering up because of like bloodline related things. And the character, if I remember correctly, the character starts by he's fighting against a big enemy, and he faces his end, and he gets reincarnated. Well, he goes back in time to his body just before the zombie apocalypse started, and he basically sets things up to keep more people alive around him. A really good setup. Art style's iffy. I'm not overwhelmed by how good the art style is. I think it's okay, but I don't think it's amazing. All right, I'm gonna put it C. The C is just because it's zombies, and there's not a lot of very good series with zombies, and it's, in my opinion, the better of the couple of ones. There's another manhwa I forgot to put on this list, actually, now that I think of it. Yuan Zhun. Young child that is born under... It's the phoenix or the dragon? I don't remember correctly. Great destiny, great story. It has a very, very typical Chinese manhwa setup to it. It's definitely better storytelling than Apotheosis is doing and Martial Peak has been doing lately. I'm going to put it in the C tier. I think it's pretty good. City of Darkness. All right, so this is probably the B tier you've never heard of. City of Darkness is a bit of an older one. I don't think it's a B tier later in the story. I actually think it's A tier for a period of it and becomes C tier for a period of it. But overall, I'm giving it a B tier. It's a dark world. The art style is very unique, very much not for everyone. I think it does brutality in fights and combat very interestingly. It's a cruel world that they're presenting, but if you want a darker manhwa that you can put your teeth into, this one is like to read around the same time as you're reading Feng Shen Ji and this one that are both kind of a similar kind of type of drawn art that kind of feels a little similar to me in vibe, even though it's significantly different. All right, Panlong. Panlong is something that deserves to be... It's a good manhwa. It's an enjoyable manhwa. But with the way it ends, and it's finished in theory, who knows, it may get a continuance sometimes, but it just ends, like, in the middle of a fight. It felt strange, actually, the way this one ended. I don't know the story behind it. If you do know the story behind, like, why Panlong suddenly stopped, give me a heads up. But the last chapters were released, I think, in 2021. But yeah, because of that suddenly stopping, I can't put Panlong above a D, because, like, literally it stops, like, kind of, like, mid-frame. Like, it doesn't continue past that. The story up till there is a solid C to B story, but that ending just, it kills it for me. Oh, God of High School, what am I going to do with you? God of High School is such a waste. This, you may disagree with this one. I'm going to put God of High School in the B tier. It might even deserve to be in the C tier. Alright, I'm going to leave God of High School in the B tier. God of High School was one of the first manhwa I ever read. I read that and Tower of God. Those were my two first manhwa that I ever read. Noblesse being the third. Phenomenal martial arts series. You've seen it if you've either read it or you've seen it on Crunchyroll when they released the series. Tons of potential that way. The craziness of what the story becomes is insanity. It just makes no sense whatsoever. It becomes absolutely bloated and no fun and just big things bashing against each other kind of thing, which is not the type of combat that I like to see, considering how amazingly fluid the combat was before. That being said, the mythology that it plays with, all the mythologies of the worlds between demons and Buddhas and different things like that, is super cool. If it was just that first arc, that first big arc, and if you've read the whole thing, you know what I mean by that midway point, I think it would still be an A. Even though it's weird as shit, I think it's still really good. But because they continued it afterwards, and the story shifts its tone quite a bit, and the relationships between the characters change quite a bit, and some stuff happens to the main protagonist that I just annoyed the crap out of me, I have to leave it at B. Like, it's a story that, like, could have been so much better, but it's finished now, so if you want to check out a manhwa that's finished, definitely go check out that one. It's still worth reading. I think everyone should pass through it at least a little bit. All right, we're at the doctor phase of this story. Okay, so we're doing medical series now. There's 5 of them here. I'm going to put Medical Return in the B tier. I think it's a great series. I don't think it's for everyone. If you're into that kind of story, it's doing something really interesting. It's doing it better than others. I love the character interactions. I think they're really on point. Big Dr. Lingran, beautiful art style. There's a common art style you'll find in this, and this that are a little similar. They're the very realistic look. Characters even look Korean in the stories. They're fun. I'm actually going to shove them probably all around the C tier. Yeah, I'm going to put them all in the C tier. I have a thing for medical series. Just so we're clear with the names, because or else you're going to kind of hate on me. Medical Return for the one in B tier. Trauma Center. Trauma Center, Great Doctor, Lingrang, Rebirth of the Legendary Doctor, and Dr. Chow Tae. So, all good if you like doctor-based stuff. Not good, to be honest. If you're not into like the whole doctor angle of it, it's not gonna be for you too much. Medical Return being the best of them in my opinion. I think the storytelling is great. Ironically, it's not the one with the best art, but it's the one with like just a better thing. Jumping into sports though. Getting into sports, we have 2 sports series, well 3 technically, but Sweet Spot, we got Top Corner and The Fighting Monster. The Fighting Monster is like a combat manhwa. It's pretty good. I don't think it lives up to something like The Boxer or anything like that, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm going to put it at C. It's worth checking out. I only included these on this list of manhwas that I actually enjoy quite a bit. That's why the C tier is rather packed, but the S tier is primarily empty because it was on the previous series. I think they're both pretty good. They're both pretty good. Where do I put you? The baseball is pretty on point. The storytelling is good. The character dynamics are fun. It's not that in-depth to the sport compared to some other ones, I feel, but yeah, I'll put them both here. Villainess. So Light and Shadow is probably one of my favorite romance stories. It's pure romance. It's pure romance. I enjoy it. It's not something I read all the time, but I think it was really well done. Not for everyone. I prefer villainous stories, generally speaking, but that being said, it's still on point. All right, Lone Necromancer, I'm going to put you at B. I think the Lone Necromancer does some stuff that's really good. The setup is completely generic. Something happens, people in an area start gaining abilities that are game-like. He chooses the Necromancer class, and he starts having Necromancer-based abilities. He can raise the dead. I think they do a good job, though, in characterization and like just storytelling in general. I think it's generally pretty good. I wouldn't put it A tier just simply because my enjoyment of it wasn't that great. It was in a vibe of necromancy when you were like reading Soul Station Necromancer and finish Soul Leveling. It's definitely something that is along those lines, but I do actually think they put a lot more effort into the necromancy in this one than they did in some of those other stories. All right, Taebaek is a story of something that knows what it is. A tutorial NPC that's like OP as hell. That's got this crazy attitude, and there's these scenarios happen. There aren't a ton of chapters. I think it's good at what it does. I think that it lacks. I don't know. I don't find the world that interesting. I do find the main character interesting, but I don't think it's a must-read, unfortunately. I think Dr. Frost is one of the most underrated manhwa out there. I'm gonna put it at B tier. Dr. Frost follows a psychologist that is also a bartender. That there's a lot of dialogue in the story, but the writing is really good. It's a webtoon, but like the quality of the art is something that reminds me a lot of some of the cartoons I saw as a kid, but not. Asian cartoons, like more European. You'll still the Asian vibes in the art style, but I feel like there's something about the art style that's like a little reminds me of a different time for when I was watching stuff. But I think it's absolutely worth checking out. Okay, locker opener. This sounds like something that would be really bad, okay? The title is terrible, but it makes perfect sense for the series. Someone that can lock has a power basically that allows him to lock anything, and there's someone that has the power to open anything. And there's just this crazy dynamic between these two characters and some interesting things they do with the storytelling and relationships in this one. I think it's really good. I think it's different. I think the art style is kind of average. I think some of the arcs are a little bit less exciting than others. I'm going to put it at C. Definitely everything in C is worth checking out. Solid one. Escort Warrior, fun, action-packed, good visuals. Overall, solid C. City of Sanctuary is a solid D. Game system stuck, real life adventures and quests. Seems like an interesting thing. I don't think it does anything special in this particular case. It doesn't quite work for me. It doesn't at all. Urban Immortal Cultivator. Okay. So Urban Immortal Cultivator is an example of a manhwa that I think is a lot of fun to read, but also not very good. It's liked by a lot of people, but there's a lot of common Chinese manhwa traits to it that just don't hit for me. That's the relationships, the way they work, and different things like that. But it's liked by a lot of people, but I have to put it in D tier. I know a lot of people love it. Child of Light is another Chinese manhwa with a fairly generic storyline. Characters' art style looks exactly like 15 other series, not particularly defined. It's currently on hiatus after only 50 chapters, which is a little bit too early to go on hiatus. It might even be complete, I don't know. Or maybe no one is subbing it, it's possible as well. I'm going to put it in the D tier. I don't think it's complete dog shit, but I think it's weak. It's weak, to say the least. Everlasting God of the Sword. You are a solid C tier. Fun manhwa, enjoyable combat, storytelling that's a little lacking at times, but some fun. Definitely some fun. Second Life of a Gangster. Okay. I know. This one's weird. I just really like it. I can't help it. Second Life of a Gangster. I like gangster stories. They kind of work for me. Like, you'll notice like a couple of like fight school things, but it just works for me. I can't even tell you why. Dungeon House. Oh god. Dungeon House doesn't work for me. The concept's kind of cool. You can't get out of your house. There's a portal to go into like a dungeon, and you have to do what you can to survive. It's just weird. It's a weird story. The setup is kind of... It's all about having a setup to force you to go into a dungeon and not be able to get out. But I don't know. I don't think it's that great. I think it's lacking in some important points. All right, Daxiang Wuxing kind of works for me. The art style is really nothing to write home about, but I like the storytelling. I like the design that they go for in a lot of cases for like characters. I think there's this badass aura to them. That being said, the art style is really not that great, but I have a lot of fun with it. I'm still gonna leave it in the D tier. Not the E tier. Will come down. I'm gonna put it in C tier. I can't put it next to Dungeon House. That doesn't make any sense. All right, Blind Faith Descent is very different than other stuff on this list. First, you have a Middle Eastern setting. You've got an art style that looks super different than other stuff out there. You've got another Necromancer type story. You have some brutal gore in this one. I think it's really enjoyable. I don't think the storytelling is that great, but I think it's a C tier. I think it's a C tier series worth checking out. Reincarnation of the Murin clan's former ranker is a hell of a lot of fun. For one of those things where there's reincarnations, there's a billion stories out there, Rankers Return, all these different return stories. Mirim one is pretty darn good. I'm gonna put okay, it sounds weird, but I'm gonna put it in the B tier. I really enjoy the return of the Mirim Ranker's former. My God, I can't even say it. The reincarnation of the Mirim clan's former ranker. I really enjoy it. I think it's in the B tier for me. I think it's really good. Villainess Maker is a B for me. Actually, most of these romance stories are Bs for me. Villainess Maker is just, I like villainous manhwa. If you're gonna be in a romance mood for manhwa, the villainous stories just work way better for me. I find them more interesting. The female characters have more agency. I feel like they're having more stuff. They're doing more things. They're not just having things happen to them. That for me is way more interesting for the character. Less of that just being swept off their feet, but rather they're part of the action of the story. And I'm just finding them more engaging. I know that I'm not necessarily the target audience for these manhwa, but I think Villainous Maker is great. I feel the same way about the Villainous Loves. Another one that I would put in the B tier. I have a bunch of romance that I've read that I would not even put on this chart. I'd put it like an F because I found the storytelling was so bad, but it happens. Star Martial God Technique. Oh, what a disappointing story. I'm going to put it at D. I'm tempting to put it in E. The only reason I did is they put themselves into a corner in the story. This creator created Tales of Demons and Gods. Because he got bored of writing Tales of Demons and Gods, he jumped over to Star Martial God Technique. And he's an amazing writer. He does a great world building in his stories, and it's super cool. But the first arc of this one ends, and the main character is sent to a new situation, and it's basically a complete reset of the stakes of the story. And you're just like, what? What happened? Makes no sense. And that's just the feeling you get reading this manhwa. It's frustrating. Okay, Master of Gu is going to be the only manhwa I have. I'm going to put Master of Gu in the S tier. And this comes with a giant caveat. Master of Gu doesn't have an ending and never will. It got canceled and will never be allowed to continue its story. But I think it is phenomenal. Really, really good and worth checking out. Master of Gu, it's one of the rare stories where I'm like, the ending kind of sucks. Well, actually, the ending really sucks. But the ride is so good. You definitely should read it. A lot of people won't agree that this S tier level storytelling. I disagree. I think it lands on everything. The story is good. The action's good. The art style is good. It's just that ending. But I would still consider Game of Thrones an S tier show, even if the ending was not great. So that being said, Existence. Okay, Existence is still too early to put in S tier. But the concept of Existence is fantastic. It reminds me, in some ways, the first chapter is like, oh, this is a little bit like To Your Eternity, where there's this being that has lived through many generations, has the chance to interact through different species, and reaches the end of maybe its final life, perhaps. The difference is, in Existence, this creature has faced the evil of mankind at every turn. And now that he's human, and he's able to channel the different powers of the creatures that he inhabited, for example, if he was an elephant in a past life, he has the foot weight of an elephant when he kicks someone down and calls upon it. It's really smart and really good, and visually looks beautiful. And I think it has the potential to be an S tier. Feels very different than what's out there. Existence of anything on this list that I would say, go give it a shot. Give a shot to Existence. It's I think, super potential, and tell me what you think about it. Plundering the Heavens has an interesting concept. Character is part of a gang that gets defeated by the sect, and they're stuck he joins them basically through the situation that happens. He joins them and he tries to get stronger within that sect, and he does, obviously. The setup is not incredible. The art style is good. Actually, I think some of the art style, monster design in particular, was phenomenal. Well, not monster design, but like the combat design is really cool and good. The general design is very typical to Chinese manhwa of cultivation stories. It's got this rebel vibe. Among Chinese manhwa, I think it's one of the more fun ones. I think it's worth checking out. Kill the Dragon. Kill the Dragon is a newer one that I think has a fair bit of potential as one that's fun. Again, generic as all hell. I don't think it's completely original, but I think its art style is really interesting, and I think it has some potential. Genius of the Unique Genius of the Unique Lineage. I feel like this was written by like a 10-year-old that was like wanted, you know what? I want my character to be a vampire and a werewolf and all the cool things at the same time. And that's kind of what the main character is, because his mom has this crazy background, his dad has this crazy background, and now he's the son of both of them, and he has the strengths of both of them. And yeah, it's alright. It's alright. It's not great. It is what it is. Okay, I'm a loser, baby. This is some relationship / funny moments, like manhwa. It's kind of fun, but it's kind of trashy at the same time. I'm going to put it at D. I think it's still fun. It's not complete garbage, but... Immortal Sword in a reverse world. Okay, I hate harems, okay? I really dislike harems. But I can't say I completely dislike this concept. The concept, specifically the concept. In this world, the strongest warriors are all women. In this reversed world, and the main character is like the first strong man that shows up in this world, and he becomes really popular with the ladies. What I don't like, though, is as a concept, it's pretty sexist for one, but just in general, I'm like, oh, okay. It's just a situation to create a harem of like a lot of powerful girls that like the main character, and it works. It works in some ways. It's funny. It's easy fun. I don't think it's complete dog crap, but it is what it is. Young B. Young B is in the world of Gosu. I'm going to put Young B in a B tier. I don't think it's as good as Gosu at all, but I think it's got some great storytelling, beautiful art. Actually looks quite different from Gosu, surprisingly, despite being connected. And yeah. Lastly but not least, Scholar's Reincarnation is another fun manhwa following a character that has a bit of a different background going into a Murim world where he becomes, well, where he's in a Murim world where he becomes stronger. And I think it's a fun series overall that manages to deliver. I don't think I can put it in the... No, I enjoy it a lot. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think Scholar's Return is really, really good. That's my tier list, guys. If you enjoyed this, the list is down below, so you can check out these different manhwa, and if you want to go back to check a specific part and where I put it on the tier list. If not, please do like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate that as well. And with that, guys, have yourself a great day.